Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Well, happy post-draft week. A lot of stories flying around. A lot going on in the National Football League right now. We have I saw some offensive rookie of the year odds out. And I'm going to start with the Bears. The impact, obviously, of having the favorite. They have the number 1 overall pick. Everyone thinks Poles is great. And the pressure that puts specifically on one individual in that building. Speaking of odds, I saw a tasty number when it comes to Bo Nix. Russell Wilson was run out of town, benched by the end of the year. I don't think it's inconceivable that Nix has somewhat of a similar season because they weren't winning that many games last year either. But the stats with offensive coach, we'll dive into that. I went on a walk the other day, I guess it was yesterday, and I listened to Max Crosby and Davante Adams. And a couple things really stood out in that podcast I want to dive into, specifically something with Jordan Love, and then just something big picture with building your team. And then we'll just fly around the league. Fox wanting $7 million for 30 seconds for the Super Bowl ads. Marvin Harrison was told he has to earn his job. Always love when coaches do that. And something on the Pats, because turns out they turned down a lot of trade offers before making the Drake Maye selection. Probably validated them staying there when you look at the teams and what they were offering and the specific coaches that wanted Maye. So we'll dive into all that. We'll keep rolling for the next couple weeks. I got some efforting out a couple guests. One's pretty unique. I think will be cool. Another one, podcaster, who's pretty solid. So we will be mixing it up over the next month for sure. But before we dive into football, you got to grab your smartphone. Mine's over charging up right now because it was low on juice. And I need you to download a little app. And that app is the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. I've watched a decent amount of NBA playoff games. Well, specifically the Knicks, Sixers, and the Lakers Nuggets. And I actually watched a couple hockey games last night because the crowds are electric. They are incredible. There is nothing like being in an arena in a hockey. I've never been to a hockey playoff game, but an NBA playoff game, 18, 20,000 people just going nuts. If you want to go to one of these games, I got you covered. Download the app, promo code John. Concerts, comedy shows, you name it. Do it on us. Just go to the app, search for tickets. They have flash deals. Cannot recommend them enough. I've been using Game Time for a long, long time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN. Save $20. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I've been saying this for a while because the hype, and rightfully so, is pretty outrageous, right? They finished the season strong. Their defense was playing well. The Sweat trade aged pretty well. He was an immediate impact player. Jalen Johnson became, I don't want to say like a superstar, but a super high-end corner. Fresno kid. Always root for him. And Ryan Poles, I think, universally is considered like a really good GM now. Just had an elite 12-month stretch. I've said this to Colin. I've said this on this podcast. Say it to anyone I talk to. The trade he made for the Panthers, whether Caleb works out or not, has to be one of the great fleece jobs in league history. Just the value alone in that trade, let alone if this trade works out, if DJ Moore continues to be a high-end player for them and Caleb Williams just becomes a top 12 quarterback. It was highway robbery. It was a Lufthansa heist. I mean, that's what it was. It turned the other franchise into shambles. I mean, no one gets made fun of more than the Panthers. And no one gets more credit. And that's what happens when you have a crazy lopsided deal. So you look at the franchise, you go, well, Bears trajectory high. Caleb, going to be the starting quarterback. I mean, at minimum, even if things go shitty for 3.5 years, he's going to get a long runway. Ryan Poles, he's getting a second coach. Here's the problem. We have absolutely no clue. None. If Eberflus is good. And all the pressure, because I saw today the odds for the first time in a long time, the Chicago Bears over-under is 8.5. And the under is like minus 140. So they are favored to have an above 500 record. And that's just from a gambling standpoint. I just think if you talk to random people, I'm not even talking Bears fans, you go, yeah, I think the Bears would be pretty good. They have not had that type hype in a long, long time. Probably since the Khalil Mack trade. And when Mitch was kind of an unknown. Well, now, let's face it, we think this team is better because clearly, even if you were high on Mitch Trubisky, your views on Caleb Williams are going to be much higher. Well, they have a coach who is not some established big-name guy who's coaching for his job. Now, you can say it's the NFL. Most coaches, beside like the top 6 or 7, are coaching for their job. But this guy, you could see a scenario if they miss the playoffs and win 8 games. And even if in some tight losses, they look really good. He is not the coach moving forward. And the big theme right now, I heard Schlereth with Coward. And he's like, one thing Steve Young used to hammer home all the time is it can be difficult for a young quarterback playing with a defensive coach, especially a highly touted guy. And Colin's big thing always is like, hire the offensive head coach. Now, obviously, there are good head coaches that aren't the offensive play caller. But if we did a coaching draft, we all know the majority of guys going in the top 5 are head coaches that call the plays. I mean, 3 of the top 5 guys for sure would be Andy, Kyle, and Sean McVay in some order. Andy would clearly go 1. And then there'd be the Harbaughs and, guys like that fighting. And even Jim, despite being viewed as like an offensive lineman, defensive guy, is a former quarterback. So you look at the situation, and everyone is really high on it, and everyone's anointing these guys. And listen, I'm no different. I like this team, but I've been around football long enough now. I've been going to training camps and been around operations from watching Andy Reid and Harbaugh coach to guys like Jim Tom Sula and Chip Kelly when he was with the 49ers, and Dennis Allen. So who your head coach is very important. We all know that. This is not like breaking news here. But the pressure that's going to be felt on this team, like Caleb has pressure, sure, but he's kind of on scholarship. Ryan Poles has pressure, sure, he ain't getting fired. There's only one guy who truly has win or you're fucked pressure, and that's Matt Eberflus. And, he's redone his image, seems like a good guy, obviously a solid defensive coach, but it's about winning this year. And I think if I went to everyone that's listening right now, and Chicago Bears fan, you'd say probably anything under 10 wins would be a disappointment. Well, who's to say this guy has that capability? Not because your roster talent isn't there, but we all know roster talent doesn't equal wins always in the NFL over the course of it. It might win you an individual game, but it doesn't lock you into a 10-7 record. Just like good coaching can overcome. I thought Brian Daboll a couple years ago had one of the great coaching years in recent memory because I didn't think their team was any good. And they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. The other thing the Bears have to deal with is the division is really, really good. I mean, the Lions roster is loaded. They didn't lose any coaches, and they didn't lose any players that matter. The Packers, everyone's kind of anointing them, and I'm probably guilty of this too. Now, Jordan Love's going to have to prove it again, but I think we can all agree probably going to be pretty good. Because as all of us learned that short of the Packers last year is like they kind of know what they're doing when it comes to quarterbacks. And we know their roster and the way they draft is always solid. So if Jordan Love, he doesn't even have to have some of the outrageous games. If he's just a top 15 quarterback, they're going to win. Why? Because their coach is proven to win constantly, whether it's Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers. And even Kevin O'Connell. I mean, he had Kirk Cousins by far having the best year of his career. I mean, there were moments last year, especially that final month before he hurt his Achilles, he was like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And we know how much talent they have on their roster. So I think that the divisional difficulties, I also looked at their schedule. They play the 49ers. They play the Rams. They play the Houston Texans. They play the Indianapolis Colts. Even the Jags, who, I think should be at least a little more feisty than last year. Like, that's a tough game. That NFC South division is not as, or AFC South division is not as easy as it's been. We know how much talent Seattle has on their roster. The Cardinals definitely have more talent this year than last year. And we saw last year when Kyler came back, like, they're a mother to deal with. Even if the Cardinals are a 6-win team, you get Kyler on the right day, he can be a major problem for anybody. So this Bears hype, and I get it, has one guy circled, because if it doesn't go well, you know who's going to get thrown overboard. The 82-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, JOHN, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Looking at those offensive rookie of the year odds, obviously Caleb is the heavy favorite. I mean, heavy favorite. And it makes sense. Like, Jaden Daniels is going to be the immediate starter. If he has a solid year, he's like 6-1. Caleb's 2-1. Xavier Worthy, right, gets to go to the Chiefs. If he has, and I saw Andy saying everyone's comparing him to Tyreek Hill, probably an unfair comparison. If you've seen Tyreek Hill, he's built like a little running back who happens to be able to run like a 3.8 40. There's not many body types and players like him in NFL history. Honestly, you could argue he's an all-time outlier. Just his body type, his receiving talents, and his speed. He's a one of one. Xavier Worthy is much closer to Deshaun Jackson. Now, Deshaun Jackson, you'd also say, is somewhat of an outlier because we haven't seen many guys of his size, 165, 170 pounds, dominate at wide receiver. So, but that's the comp that Andy made. And if you remember, Deshaun Jackson hit the ground running. Now, Deshaun Jackson probably is a top 15-ish pick. Had a lot of question marks coming out of Cal. And he's even talked about it. When he got the draft day phone call from Andy Reid, Andy basically told him, like, none of that shit's going to fly. And there's like famous videos and famous like Eagle lore that if you look on TV, if you YouTube, when Andy calls Deshaun's face kind of, because Andy's kind of lighting into him. And this is before there are a bunch of cameras in the draft room. Lighting into him like, you're going to come here. None of this BS is going to happen. And Deshaun went there and was incredible early. So I get it. If he's anywhere close to that, Xavier Worthy is going to be a problem. Last year, the Broncos were a joke for parts of the season. I mean, a joke. I mean, they gave up 70 points in an NFL game. I don't think we'll ever see that again. It's one of the most gutless performances in NFL history. I think it's fair to say. But by the end of the season, they were kind of just, they were feisty. They were competitive. They were an NFL team. I mean, early on, it's like, Sean, what are you doing here? When they benched Russell Wilson, I looked at his numbers today. He had 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Now, I don't remember in recent, watching football where a guy's numbers and watching him on TV didn't match. But if you're a rookie and you have anywhere near 25 touchdowns, 7-8 picks, like, you're going to be in the mix, even if your team goes 7-10 or 8-9, which I think the Broncos are somewhat in kind of that mix. But who's to say the Broncos offense this season isn't better with Bo Nix, who, like Michael Penix or Caleb Williams, is kind of a plug-and-play player. Now, how good they are, it's the NFL, who knows? But these are not need to sit on the bench and learn. This guy's ready to roll. And what does he have going for him? A lot like what J.J. McCarthy is going to have going for him in Minnesota, or Patrick Mahomes had going for him when he went to Andy Reid, or Brock Purdy has going for him when he goes to Kyle Shanahan. An offensive coach who is the play caller. And we can criticize Sean Payton, and it's been weird. I don't blame him at all for Russell Wilson, at all. It'd be the last quarterback I'd want to deal with, especially as his trajectory's down. He's making all that money. I didn't sign him to that money. He's saying a bunch of weird shit. You're like, get out of here, bro. Now, eating the money sucks, but Sean Payton was asked about it at the owners' meetings, like, was it hard to make that decision? He said no before you could even blink. He had made up his mind probably halfway through last season. This guy, gone. So to me, Bo Nix when you just look at value and when you just step back from a non-gambling standpoint, why couldn't he be productive in that offense? I mean, there were points when he had Teddy Bridgewater and Jameis Winston looking capable. I think we all agree if Sean Payton last year was the coach of the Saints with Derek Carr, the Saints would have won that division. But they were such a joke with their operation with Dennis Allen. Their offensive coordinator got run out of town. But if you gave Sean Payton Derek Carr, I bet the Saints win 10 games. So to me, Bo Nix is a very, very interesting guy. Now, how good the team is going to be, how many, like, are they a playoff team in the next couple of years? Long way to go. But just in terms of offensive production, like, he goes to a pretty seamless transition when you get to go from a pretty easy offense in Oregon. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks for the last couple decades have had a lot of success there. For a coach that's, say what you want about him, pretty good when it comes to calling offensive plays. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You know, the first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back, and you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you know, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row seat, and I like a big, you know, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, you know, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, you know, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. I went for a walk on Tuesday afternoon, and I'm trying to, I need to lose about 15 pounds, kind of got fat. Diet's gone to shit, but we're on the straight and narrow, trying to do double days, work out, walk in the afternoons. And I usually, throw on the AirPods and listen to a podcast. And right before I left, I was at my computer and I saw on social media that Max Crosby had Davante Adams on. And I've listened to a couple Max podcasts on YouTube when he had Latu on, he had Gardner Minshew. It was like, kind of entertaining. So I threw it on. I'm a Fresno State guy. I followed Davante's career very, very closely. The guy he talks about in the podcast, Keith Williams, is one of his close mentors. I think he considers a guy like a family. I love Keith. I consider him like family too. He's a stud. And right when I got hired with the Eagles, they were recruiting Davante, so we never crossed paths. But yeah, I followed his career very, very closely, and I'm just a massive, massive Davante Adams fan, not just as the player, but what he stands for as a guy. And so I was like, this is going to be a pretty good podcast. And a couple things really jumped out to me as I'm walking around the neighborhood, sweating my what off. First and foremost is he discussed, and I think this shows you, when you draft a quarterback, 1 or 2, like if Caleb becomes a star, if Jaden Daniels becomes a star, if Drake Maye becomes a star, There's a little element of luck in that because you never know as an organization. But like those weren't lucky picks. When you invest a high pick in a quarterback, you're expecting that guy to be good. Maybe not Patrick Mahomes or maybe not Joe Montana or Tom Brady, but just to be a guy that you're giving a second contract to and can be your quarterback for, we say 10 years, but with a quarterback, 15 years. Be your starter until he can't throw the ball anymore. But there are a ton of quarterbacks in the NFL that were not top 5 picks that make a ton of money. Dak Prescott got drafted and Cousins got drafted in the middle rounds. Both guys have made hundreds of millions of dollars. Cowboys got lucky with Dak Prescott. If they knew he was going to be as good as he's become, they would have drafted him in the first round. Look at Russell Wilson with Seattle. Changed Pete Carroll's career. Drafted him in the 3rd round. Hell, the Ravens drafted multiple players before they picked Lamar Jackson. They had no clue he was going to be this good. There are some guys, the Chiefs, valued Patrick Mahomes a lot, right? They traded up to get him at pick 10. Same thing with the Bills with Josh Allen, traded up to 7. Even the Chargers, who, like, I'll defend Justin Herbert still to this day, but they got lucky with that pick, even though they got him at 6, because they would have taken Tua if they would have had the 5th pick. Brock Purdy's a good example. The 49ers, you think the 49ers had any clue? They didn't think the guy was going to make the team. Then early on in training camp, they're like, yeah, this guy's definitely making the team. But you never know if a guy's good until they play. That's the hard part of a quarterback. Like, I can rotate other guys in, start you on special teams, rotate you 10, 12 plays as a defensive pass rusher, give you some slot reps if you're a wide receiver. If you're a linebacker or a DB, I can put you in some different packages. I can kind of there's no easing you in quarterback. You either start or you don't. And if you're not the starting quarterback and that guy doesn't get hurt, look at Dak Prescott. The reason he became the starter, Tony Romo's back broke, and then Kellen Moore, I think, broke a thumb and got thrusted. No different than Brock Purdy. Why'd Brock Purdy start? Trey Lance shatters his ankle. Jimmy Garoppolo breaks his foot. Like, you need things to kind of break your way. Even if the team likes you, there's a lot different than liking you in August and seeing you win games in November. So when you look at the quarterback situation, no one really knows. No one really knows. Trevor Lawrence and Caleb, we think we know, but then they got to do it. But most of these other guys, who knows? Hold on for your ass. See what works. Hopefully you can coach them up and you do a good job around them. Davante Adams played on the same team with Jordan Love for several years and said, I didn't think he was going to, I asked to get traded because Aaron was gone and I didn't trust playing with Jordan Love. The guy was his teammate. Now, it's unique because in football, Davante Adams would not be taking reps with Jordan Love. Like, you don't mix in the quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, during the fall, gets all the reps with Davante Adams. So he wouldn't throw to him beside the one scenario, I think the Chiefs game, when Rodgers wasn't allowed to play because of the vid. So, but Davante admitted on the podcast, like, yeah, blew me away. Wish I could bring him over here to the Raiders now. But I didn't know. And if anything, I didn't think. I was much more confident in Derek Carr, a guy that I had played with in college. So Davante Adams, if he's at practice every day, he's a fucking receiver. Who are they the most dependent on? More than anybody, the quarterback. And he's going, yeah, I don't know. Don't see it. And you could argue Jordan Love, if he maintains this level of play and becomes a 10-year starter for the Packers and a high-end top 7-8 quarterback in the NFL, is one of the craziest stories ever. I mean, it really is. It has some Steve Young vibes where no one saw it coming. Not even the players on his own team. Now, maybe that was different in the late 80s with Steve Young. Maybe some of the players knew it. But it's like, we got Joe Montana. We got Aaron Rodgers. What are we talking about? And then by the end of the season, Jordan Love was playing like he was playing. So I think it's a good, a guy that was there saying, yeah, blew me away. Never believed in a million years this would happen. I literally asked for a trade. Now, originally the year before, I think the Packers had made a contract offer that Davante was pissed off about. Came back his last season with Green Bay, dominated, and then they offered the real contract. He easily could have stayed there, but he didn't think Jordan Love could play. And I don't blame him, because I don't think anyone thought that. Hell, I don't even think the Packers thought that halfway through last season. When their general manager said during the bye, Yeah, these last 10 games are going to determine his future. So you could argue that a guy's second half of a season, I mean, might have changed the entire franchise. And it just shows you until you get reps. Like, I went to Cal Poly, learn by doing. That's the only way you can get better is through experience. Now, just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. Especially in football, you need the talent. But Jordan Love sure got good. And I think he's made Davante claims he doesn't regret it. I do think if he knew that Jordan Love was going to be this good, he probably would have stayed. And he somewhat alluded to that. The other thing is this. We have talked about this on Fugazi Fridays, the work-life balance argument. And I say everyone's different, right? If you work a 9 to 5 and you're making 75 grand, I don't expect you to give everything you have for that company. But even if you are, a quote unquote W-2 employee and I'm paying you $1 million, I probably expect a little more. I expect for you to dedicate a lot to your job, whatever that may be. So you could argue the price of what I pay you determines your work-life balance. I do think that's fair in the world we live in. The more you get paid, the more is, on your plate. You're making 50 grand. Fuck, what? I can't expect that much out of you, and I don't blame you if you don't put that much into you. But this happens a lot during the draft season when this is something that's always bothered me. A couple things have always bothered me about the draft, but this one specifically, when coaches will crush guys like, yeah, I don't think he likes football that much. I don't think he has too many other hobbies. I don't want you to have that many hobbies. And you listen to Max Crosby, you listen to Davante Adams, you listen to all the great players. Like football on their priority list, I'm not expecting you to like it and have it mean more than like your kid, right? Or your faith. It's why God family football is something that gets said in college and pro football a lot. But it better be damn high on your priority list. And it better be almost even more than a burning passion deep inside you. Because when you listen to those two guys, Max Crosby's been talking about this for a while. He obviously is sober now, after years of, battling some stuff. And in the offseason, he goes to the gym every single day at like 6 a.m. I'm talking like February and March, the Raiders facility, and works out. He says it just tries to help give him the mental edge. And you listen to Davante, what it means for him to work on his craft and to just practice like Jerry Rice. And I think this goes around. You just saw the Kansas City Chiefs gave Travis Kelce a 2-year contract, like $35 million guaranteed at all, which is based on his production, his career is the easiest money they've ever spent, even if he's not quite the same guy as he was 3 or 4 years ago. Never forget meeting him last year at TPC Scottsdale. He was walking to the driving range because one of his buddies is on the Corn Ferry tour, and he would just go there to practice. I don't think he hangs out in Scottsdale as much anymore with Taylor. This is pre-Taylor Swift. Well, at least publicly. I think it was because he was spending a lot of time in Scottsdale. But when I told him that I knew Andy and Veach and we started bullshitting for a minute, and it kind of ended with him like, yeah, I can't wait. And this was probably right around this time, maybe even in mid-April. It might have been before the draft. He said, I can't wait to get back to Kansas City for OTAs. I love practicing. I love football. I can't wait to get back with the boys and start working. And this notion, you hear this a lot in the draft. Like we say the word character a lot when we're judging prospects. Character's more than just like take your hat off when you meet an older lady or open the door for a grandma, right? Or shake someone's hand and look them in the eye. A lot of character gets talked about in the NFL about football character. How bad do you want it? How much it means to you. We all know successful people in some walk of life, right? And I would say and I'm saying financially, they're good at their job, that have a successful company or inside of a company or just doing really well. Wouldn't you say most of them work extremely hard and are very, very passionate about what they do? And what they do means a lot to them deep, deep down, like deep in their inner beings. Scotty Scheffler said last week after he won the RBC, after he had just won the Masters, like, how are you doing this? He said, guys, I love golf. I love practicing golf. I love playing golf. I love everything about golf. Tiger said that at Augusta. Same thing. Like, Tiger, why are you still doing this? Because I love doing this. And when you hear Max and Davante, you're like, God. Now, listen, are the Raiders going to be good? Their quarterback situation is not ideal. But there's a reason those guys are super high-end players. Davante went in the second round. Max Crosby was a mid-round pick. Travis Kelce, same thing, third rounder. His brother was a sixth rounder. Football means everything beside their family. And if you don't have a lot of those guys, and if they're not your best players, you don't really have a shot. I remember talking to Keith Williams, Davante's guy at the Combine, about Lamar. He fucking loves Lamar Jackson because everyone in that building loves Lamar Jackson because of how much football means to him. And there are a lot of guys, some guys have success in the NFL that don't really like football. No different than all these sports, basketball, baseball. They just have the God-given talent. But big picture, they're capped. And they're the type guys that usually fall off faster, health permitting. So when I listened to that podcast, I went, this is what teams are looking for. These are the type guys. Now, there's a lot of other factors. Once you get money, how do you react? There's stuff that you never know. You think you could have a pretty good educated guess, right? You listen to Davante and Max talk like they've been unfazed by money. Honestly, it just inspires them to work harder. And that's ideally in this draft process what you're working for. Travis Kelce last year, before the season even started, Hall of Famer. All pros, Pro Bowls, multiple Super Bowls. He's an absolutely legendary player. And in that playoff run, he kept saying, I've never wanted anything more. And he hammered that home both weeks before the Super Bowl. I've never wanted to win this game more than this year. And in that play where he shoved Andy Reid, I remember Andy telling me at the Combine, he's like, he doesn't even realize that I'm taking him in and out. I'm trying to, keep him fresh. But I love that about him. Like I like being in the trenches with that. Like, yeah, did he lose his emotional stability right there for a second? Of course. But this is football. This isn't beer league softball. There's a lot on the line here. And he's proven and shown me for a decade how bad he wants it. So I think the Chiefs are a great example of their best players. This is why they are the new Patriots. Because when you listen to Devin McCourty and Tom Brady and Julian Edelman and that core group of guys talk about football, God, these guys like this shit a lot. They're addicted. And usually most successful people, whether it's healthy or not, are addicted to what they're doing. Kind of the price of success. A couple other just NFL news and notes. Fox, I saw, wants $7 million for 30 seconds of an ad. And I've said this for a while, that when I was a kid, I remember going to parties at my buddy's house for the Super Bowl in the 90s. I vividly remember watching the Steelers-Packers Super Bowl. Was the Packers-Patriots Super Bowl. Some of those maybe it was the Steelers against the Cowboys, then the Patriots against the Favre, and then Favre, his second game was against the Broncos. Kind of that little 3-year stretch. And the Super Bowl commercials were a really, really big deal. All the biggest brands in America, whether it was McDonald's, whether it was Budweiser, whether it was Chevrolet, it was a big time for them to shine. Because 100 million people were sitting there, and between the action, we're still sitting there. Times have changed. I've noticed it the last couple Super Bowls, whether I've been at a party or whether I was just watching it with Maria. When the commercials come on, I go to my cell phone. I was watching Tiger Woods today, who's probably my favorite athlete. He has this new clothing brand called Sunday Red. And he's I wouldn't wear it. I think he kind of screwed up on the logo. It should have been more of like an iconic picture of him, a lot like Michael Jordan flying through the air for the Jordan brand. But regardless of any of that stuff, he went on a press tour today. Here's the problem. Tiger went on a press tour like it was 2006. Good Morning America. It's like, Tiger, do you want my mom, who's 75 and retired, to care about your stuff? Or do you want the people that are 40, 50 years old because its price points are really high, with a high household income to buy this stuff because they're not watching any of this stuff you're going on. Tiger, in 2024, do you know where you should go? Go on podcasts. Go on someone's YouTube show. Go somewhere. Go on Pardon My Take. Go on Colin's. I'd love to have you, but probably make more sense to go on with Colin. Do that type stuff. That's where your audience is, where you want to sell this. Go on No Laying Up's podcast. Going on with Carson Daly. Do you think any of the people that would buy your stuff are sitting down watching that stuff? But I understand it. Like in Tiger's heyday, that stuff mattered. And the people Tiger's surrounded with that run his money have been doing it for 20 plus years. That stuff in their head matters. It no longer matters. And I just wonder, if I was a company, why would you spend $7 million? Now, if you're Meta or what these companies with unlimited amounts of money, like what does it hurt? But even if I ran Chevy or Budweiser, like I think we could utilize that money much differently now. The consumer and the world has dramatically changed. That commercial is nowhere near as powerful. Now, there are still going to be a lot of people surrounded the TV and see it in the backdrop. But I think the day and age of everyone just kind of watching it, like that was a huge part of the event, because anyone that's my age or older, the Super Bowl commercials were, I would say, as big as the Super Bowl. They were massive. It went hand in hand. I just don't believe it does. Because I know as a 39-year-old guy, they don't mean shit to me anymore. And they haven't in a long time. Why? Because I'm not really paying attention. And I've seen the power of this device, which is not the healthiest thing, but it is what it is. And we go to that thing immediately. I love when coaches, and this is a classic coach thing, totally understand, like second, third rounder, if you come out and be like, listen, I know we have openings at both guard spots, but our second round pick is going to have to earn his way. I totally get it. But anytime you take a guy really high in the draft and the coach comes out and goes, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have to earn his spot. It's like, guys, no, he's not. Obviously, he can't just never show up to practice and show up week one and play. But like, if Marvin Harrison is in the building and practicing, we not only know he's your starter, we know he's your leading receiver. I'll never forget, and the Cardinals coaching staff is really young. Gannon's like early 40s, may even be like 39, 40. Both of his coordinators, I think, are under 40. His offensive coordinator's like 33. I think his defensive coordinator's 35. So I'm all for giving millennial shots. But Vic Fangio, who's definitely not that age and very old school. I remember being around the Niners when I had a radio show, and they drafted Eric Reed. His brother Justin's on the Chiefs, and he was a really good player coming out of LSU, and they desperately needed a safety. And Fangio's like, we don't hand jobs out here. You got to earn that shit. All through preseason, all through training camp, Eric Reed ran with the twos. It's like, what, Vic? I think you're excellent, but what are we doing here? You know what happened week one when they rolled out? Eric Reed was starting safety. Investments, what you put into these guys, the draft capital, what you're actually paying. Marvin Harrison's going to sign a contract at like $34 million. They're going to guarantee him $25 million. Yes, he's your starter. Last but not least, the Patriots. I think I said a couple weeks ago that they were clearly going to have a lot of options, that their team sucks so bad that they should just trade back, start building up their team. I don't necessarily am going to pivot off that spot, but I do understand this. When you have people interested in what you have, to me, the people interested in what you have should matter. If you think the guy's an idiot, you're like, this guy, whatever. Could we just fleece this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing. The Patriots, it was reported that the Giants offered pick 6 and a 2025 first-round pick. I think we all agree this Giants team is no lock to be 8-9 wins. They could, but would it shock you if they're 6-11? So that pick, Ryan Poles did it once upon a time, could be very, very valuable. Here's the problem. The Giants, they wanted Drake Maye. Same with Minnesota, who we'll get into in a second. The Giants GM was the assistant GM, and Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator when they moved up and got a guy like Josh Allen. So if you go, wait, these guys who were a big part of the move up to get Josh now really value this guy. And then Kevin O'Connell, who worked with Stafford, who last year worked with Cousins, or the last couple years worked with Cousins, clearly has established himself. Pretty good young offensive play caller / quarterback guy, former quarterback himself. Offered 11, 23, and a 25 first for Drake Maye. So you go, wait. These two guys who clearly have a pretty good feel for what works in this league at that position, young and old, want our guy, want the guy that we also like, even though we have a lot of other issues. Maybe it makes the most sense to just take this player. Are we equipped to handle right away? Probably not. Is it a great situation for him? No, it's not. But could we ever live down if Daboll resurrects his career or Kevin O'Connell becomes a legend because Drake Maye is the next Josh Allen or Herbert? We'd have fucking problems. And all of us, even if the Jonathan Kraft, who is the GM, signs off on it, we're all getting fired. Because if you think they're mad in Boston now, if we did that and then that kid's a baller, we're all done. So I get it, and I think I heard someone say that those teams doing that and their interest in him just validated their thoughts on the player. I get it. And it definitely is the right move in terms of you need a quarterback, take a guy with a ton of talent. Now, is it a great landing spot or is it going to look good? I would probably bet against that.